Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, Ed Opperman, private investigator, digital forensic investigator, blogger at the Opperman Report blog, author of the book, How to Succeed as a Private Investigator, which is available at my website, emailrevealer.com. Once again, I want to thank my producer, Ann, for all her help in getting the show together all week long, plotting and scheming together with me and working on the show behind the scenes and getting guests and producing all the stuff we have to produce around here. But don't forget, this is a listener-sponsored station. We have no corporate sponsors, so we need your support. So if you want to support the station, you want to keep us on the air, you got to visit freedomlips.com and click on the donate button. Okay, so real quick before we get to our guest, I just want to mention last week's guest, Jack Duffy, the trial lawyer from Fort Worth, Texas, who is the author of the book, The Man from 2063, available on Amazon.com. We got a lot of response about Jack Duffy and his expertise in the JFK assassination conspiracy. And the guy's a fountain of information. He sent me his book, and I haven't had a chance to read the entire book yet, but I've been leafing through it. It's just like an encyclopedia of information and data and facts about the Kennedy assassination. So if you missed last week's show, you can go to YouTube and look up Revolution Radio YouTube channel, or just search for Ed Opperman, Opperman Report, and it'll come up, the Jack Duffy interview. And we got a lot of response about that. A lot of people really like that interview. Now, coming up, we got Vito Colucci. Vito Colucci is a private investigator from Connecticut. He's going to be on my show next week. He's been involved in this whole Michael Skakel trial. He testified at the trial. He was involved with the first defense team. He's the only one from the first defense team that's being kept on for the second defense, because Michael Skakel got a new trial, and Vito's going to be on that as well. We'll be talking about his book, Rogue Town, which is all about crime and corruption in Connecticut, back when Vito was a cop in Connecticut. And Vito has his own radio show called Crime Time with Vito Colucci, P.I., and that's going to be on businesstalkradio.net. And I'm going to be a guest this Sunday night, 8 p.m. Pacific time, on businesstalkradio.net with Vito Colucci. And we already taped it. We taped it on Monday morning. And Vito's a fun guy. You know, we joke around a lot. And he got me to tell some stories I wasn't expecting to tell on the radio. But we got him out there. Coming up in the future, we got Pat Brown, criminal profiler. He's here all the time on HLN and Court TV. And we got another guy from the West Memphis 3 case, an author, William Ramsey, author of Abomination, Devil Worship, Deception, and the West Memphis 3 murders. Now today, we got Steph Watts. I'm really looking forward to Steph Watts today. He's a really cool guy. We chat all the time on Facebook. Yeah, he's laughing because we fight a lot. Okay. But he's an investigative reporter and a TV producer. He started out with Nancy Grace and on the Greta Van Susteren show, and he's been on Inside Edition. He's been involved in a lot of big. He was written about by Mark Furman. Mentioned him in his book and wrote about him in his book Murder Business, and he was in a book about Joran Van Sloo called Portrait of a Monster. And he's currently producing and True TV stuff, and he has a documentary show he's going to tell us about. So, Steph, welcome to the show. And
thank you very much. Thank you very much. I really liked your intro, Oakland. That was pretty. I got scared when I heard that. Good Halloween intro.
Yeah, that's my new intro, man. Do you know what song that is?
I love that. Well, you know, no, you know what? I don't want to date you, but I don't actually know what that is.
It's the Socialist International. It's the Russian national anthem.
Oh, all right. Well, I'm from Canada, so you know, I have a good excuse not to know.
Tell us about yourself, bro. Tell us about.
Oh man, I hate talking about me. I'm so good at talking about other cases and other people. It's always hard to be in the hot seat, but I'll do my best. It's a funny story. I actually was born and raised in Canada, and I came to the States, to New York, when I studied I did a summer program at NYU, and it was the summer that Princess Diana died, and we were kind of practicing, you know, doing stories for NYU, you know, television, and it was just such a crazy summer, and I just remember how much I fell in love with New York, and I went back home and packed up my bags and said, I'm going to the States, I don't care what I have to do. And I came down here, did an internship at the Village Voice where I really worked with some great writers and did some real investigative and interesting pieces. From there, I went to Brill's Content Magazine, a magazine that was written and created by Stephen Brill, who actually started Court TV. It was an inside media magazine. It was a little bit before its time, but it's certainly a great experience. When that magazine folded, Steve Brill had gotten me sort of a contact over at Court TV, and I started working as an associate producer in documentaries, longer format crime, covering some of the, longer, back when they were Court TV and did crime. From there I moved to daytime trial coverage, covered all the big trials live and taped, and that's where I connected with Nancy Grace. Did a show called Hollywood at Large, which Nancy appeared on a lot, and Nancy and I did a radio show during the the Scott Peterson case, out of California. And from there, Nancy was in the process of developing her headline news show, and I moved over there with her, and it was a fantastic experience. She was a wonderful talent to work with, passionate, great friend, and good person to be involved with. Years later, I left to move on and went to Fox News and worked with Greta Van Susteren to continue to investigate and report on crimes for Fox News. From there, I did a short year in morning television. And at that point, Ed, I'd actually just burnt out from traveling and covering live TV, and I really missed the longer format stuff where I started out. Ed, giving you the time to really talk to people, investigate cases, and not churning out the daily stuff. So I went on my own, started a blog, started my own production company, and I'm currently producing and hosting stuff. My biggest client is Investigation Discovery. They're an amazing, wonderful network that's doing incredibly well. And that's where we're at today. And I'm doing guesting on radio shows, and I'm in the process of writing a book and all that stuff. So, hey, that's it.
Okay, well, wait a second. Now, what's the book going to be about?
Well, I believe I'm going to call my book. It's funny. I was approached to do books, and I started throwing a couple of ideas around about a year ago. And a lot of people, Ed, wanted me to write about my experiences inside the television business, particularly working with Nancy and Greta and Diane Sawyer and all the big talent. I'm not interested in doing that kind of stuff. That doesn't interest me. That's a personal relationship that I had with those people that I don't feel like talking about in a book, and they were looking for the negative stuff, and that's not what I want to do. What I'd really like to write about, Ed, which really interests me, is I'm going to call it the politics of murder. And, I just finished a story with Marcia Clark, and I'll give you a great example. When these cases go to trial, the prosecutors have to wheel and deal with the lives of not just the victims, but the lives of the killer. They got to make deals. Stuff has to be cut, and nobody likes it, but it's the only way to get justice in a broken system. So I really want to look at some of the big cases, but take people behind the scenes to the deals that went down to get these convictions. People don't realize what has to happen. You can't talk about this. This is coming off the table. We're going to take death off, but you can't mention that he raped 3 people 10 years ago. The family has to agree to certain things. Evidence has to be kept out. I believe in a system that fully discloses everything. If I'm going to go on trial, I would like the jury to know the nitty and gritty, everything about my life because it plays to my character. That's not the system we have in this country. It's a flawed system, and the prosecutors and the defense team both have to work around the system, and it's really, Ed, becomes a game of who's going to get the best upper hand, who's going to get, who knows the judge. So that's the kind of stuff I want to talk about. Now, to make it interesting, because it could be boring to anybody else except me and you, crime junkies, I've got to attach it to high-profile cases, which I'm planning on doing, and ones that I've worked on. So I have insight into them. So the politics of murder.
Let me ask you something. Okay,
I
would buy that book for sure.
Thanks, man.
Now, what about the influence? Something I'm disturbed about lately is the influence of HLN and these crime TV shows that they're having on the case itself.
Well, it's an interesting question because I always believe, Ed, that the camera changes everything. I think, the judges and do their best to really monitor how much of an influence it's having on what's going on in the courtroom, particularly with the jury. So I understand what you're saying, and I'm always trying to figure out, is it, Ed, just being influenced in the court of public opinion, or is that really trickling down to the 12 people in that room that are going to make the decision? That's what matters. If those people are being influenced by outside media influences, then that's where we have to be concerned. So there could, sorry, I'm in New York City. There's shocking, there's a siren going on behind me. So.
Doesn't bother me at all.
Giving you a little crime and justice feel to my...
They're coming to get you.
I know what you're saying, so I think, we see all this brouhaha and the talking heads, and I'm, included in that, and the day-to-day coverage and the obsession with these cases. But how much of that is trickling over to the jury? I don't know. It's hard to say. It's hard for me to believe that those 12 people can be sequestered or locked into a room for 1 week, 3 months, let alone even 3 days, without having any kind of outside contact. We have to take their word for it that is the case. So, the way prosecutors are going to, does it influence the judge? It's hard. It's such an interesting question.
I got one for you. What about the Jodi Arias trial, where the witness, the domestic violence witness, expert witness, LaViolette, where she said she didn't want to return and testify in the the penalty phase because of threats and intimidation and stalking behavior online into her life? Well,
that's interesting, but it's unfortunate. It was, I'll give you another example. It was like, I'm working on a high-profile stalking case right now, and it's like when Madonna had a stalker, a very, very serious stalker, and Marcia Clark actually prosecuted that case. When it came down to it, Madonna didn't want to go to, she's like, I don't want to come into court. Well, you know what? It's too bad because and I know you don't want to come into court, but you have to. It's your duty as a citizen. That's what you have to do. And it's an unfortunate world where we live in. And I've been a victim of it. Ed, you probably have been too. Anybody out there that's some kind of a name or can have things said about it. It's your duty for justice. So, now, if you feel that you're being threatened that serious, then you take legal action against that. But that's not. She's not fulfilling her judicial duty by saying that. Bringing it to the attention of us is interesting, but she has a judicial duty.
No, I got you. I can respect that. You're saying she should bite the bullet. She took on the job. She went in there, and she should finish the job. And you're probably right, because Jodi Arias is facing a death penalty, and we all need to bite the bullet and chip in on that kind of thing.
And to bring Jodi Arias back to your first question, there's somebody who loved the attention. There's somebody who's delusional, doesn't understand what's going on, and really is sort of that classic person that is, almost reminds me, Ed, of the Chicago, the musical or the movie where they were the two killers were starstruck by the media. That's Jodi Arias. She was one who was playing for the cameras. She was one who's been acting in this since she was in that room, the interrogation room, doing handstands and acting up and doing all crazy stuff. She was certainly influenced by the cameras in that courtroom, lapping it up, loving the attention, feeling somehow how it was going to work to her advantage. Clearly, it didn't.
Well, I would say so. I would agree with that one. Okay, obviously it didn't turn out too well for her. But now, what about Juan Martinez? Don't you think he was playing up for the cameras too?
Juan Martinez, refresh me on Juan Martinez.
He was the prosecutor. Remember the prosecutor, the short guy?
Well, the prosecutor's job is to tell a story, and, you've got to have the attention of the jury. You've been in court, Ed, and I've sat in court. The problem, here's the issues with live trials. People don't realize that, we're editing out a lot of the boring stuff. Sitting in court can be extremely boring. I've fallen asleep, guilty as charged. I've seen attorneys fall asleep, defendants fall asleep, jurors fall asleep. So their job is to be large and animated. If I was a prosecutor, that's how I would be. So I don't want to say he was necessarily playing to the cameras. He was playing to continue to keep the attention of the 12 people in the room. I would hope that that's what he was doing, and that's what their job is. And I respect and appreciate an animated defense attorney or prosecutor because they've got to keep the attention of those people. That's a lot to sit and listen for day after day after day. And it's not all exciting. There's a lot of boring testimony that you have to pay attention to. I don't know if he was necessarily playing to the cameras.
I think he did. But I also think that Martinez was also showboating quite a bit during that trial.
Well, I'm going to be honest with you. I think the cameras changed the dynamics. Mm-hmm. I believe that any prosecutor, whose wife or husband says, honey, don't forget you're going to be on camera today. Wear a nice tie. Don't forget to fix your hair. That stuff goes on. Of course they're aware of the cameras. Does it change the performance? I believe so. I agree. If you're going to put me against the wall and ask me, does it change people's behavior in the courtroom? I'm going to have to tell you, yes, it does. I think it does. I think it changes everybody's behavior in the courtroom. It doesn't matter who it is. I think it's the judges, the jurors, the defendants. I think it does. If you want me to answer the question honestly, yeah, I think it does.
Because not just the courtroom, but when Court TV and HLN, when they come to town, okay, all the time. Like when
I know.
Yeah.
Hello?
Yeah.
Hello.
Can you hear? Did you really lose me?
No, I got you.
Okay,
no,
good.
You're not.
Okay, like with the last OJ trial here
I
in
was
Vegas.
there. I was there.
Oh, really? The one where with Ozzie Fumo, where they were trying to get get him a new trial?
Are you talking about Michael Jackson or OJ?
OJ Simpson.
Yeah, I was at OJ's trial. Yeah, I was there.
Were you just at the trial, the hearings just very recently, where it was about Yale Galanter not doing a good job?
No, yeah, he's trying. Yeah, I know we're gonna talk about the Moxley case, but it's similar. His ineffective counsel. Let me tell you something. I know Yale, and I like Yale, and I respect him for what he did for OJ. He did a lot of great things for OJ, and him and acted like OJ's best friend. So for OJ to now come and say that was ineffective counsel, I think is a slap in the face to Yale Galanter. OJ needs to own what he did for once in his life, and ineffective counsel it's not going to happen. Well, Yale's a very, very talented attorney.
But the point I was trying to get at, though, was that when Court TV and HLN come to town for a hearing like that, they take over the whole town. They take over all of downtown. There's trailers, there's lights, there's things are roped off. They take up all the parking. They take up all the bars and restaurants downtown for these big, giant trials. So it doesn't just take over the courtroom. It takes over all of downtown. And all of the lawyers downtown that are hanging around, stuff like people that work at the courts, they all want to be on Court TV's good side. They want to be on HLN's good side because maybe they can get interviewed. Maybe they can get to know somebody, get to meet somebody to further their own career. So when I'm saying, like, when the circus comes to town, okay, it takes over, and I think that is what's having a major influence on a trial.
Yeah, you're right. It does. It adds to the hype. It's certainly good for the economy, particularly in Florida, where they can certainly use the business. Things have been tough down there, but no, it does. I agree with you. It adds to the circus-like atmosphere. My only concern was if when I'm watching these trials or covering these trials, I just hope that all of us are not thwarting justice. I hope that justice is served accordingly and accurately, regardless of whether we're there or not. I'm concerned, Ed, I share the same concerns with you because our jobs are to be storytellers, to be informants, to be relayers of information, not to be influences over the outcome or be influences on justice. And it's a line that I believe, has probably been crossed.
Yeah, let me give you an example. Like Vinny Politan, I'm sure he's a friend of yours, and so I'm not asking you to, stab in the back or anything like that. But he has this jury show that's on every night that started during the Jodi Arias trial, and where every night he puts on a mock jury trial, where basically sometimes the question is as bad as, is Jodi Arias so evil that she should be tortured? That's the bold question. Should she be tortured before we kill her?
I know exactly. Listen, Ed, I don't disagree with you. I think as journalists, We are. It's interesting, and I understand the situation. I'm going to try to explain it to you, and I know you'll get it. When I'm in the field, you know, I'm under tremendous pressure, and this is what I was talking about. One of the reasons why I started laughing and went to longer format stuff. You know, the network is like, you know, Steph, you know, you rate, you want you top of the hour, you got to have a story for tonight. And I'm thinking, I'm on the Casey Anthony case. I'm like, the hell am I going to talk about? I've talked about everything there, so I got to find something. I got to find an angle to talk about. I got to report something. That's a tremendous pressure, and if you don't handle that responsibility accordingly by doing a recap or talking about it, something, you know, or being smart enough to find a new angle, then you're put in that position, Ed, to ask those kind of sensationalistic questions, and I don't think it's responsible. I don't like doing that kind of stuff. I love Vinny, but I think there's, like, they get into, you know, it gets a little sensationalistic, and it's not the direction that I would go, but I understand the pressures to keep ratings up and keep the conversation going.
Yeah, I don't want to point a finger at Vinny or single him out, because we're all doing it. Okay, we're all doing it. But I'm fearful. I'm fearful of this, that these TV shows that we're both doing, you know, are targeting defendants to an extreme and perverting the justice system, and in some ways even tampering with the jury. If I were to be standing out in front of a juror's house with a megaphone declaring every night over and over Jodi Arias is the devil, you know, I would be in big trouble. I would probably be under arrest for trying to tamper with a jury. But
well, I think the biggest first-hand experience that I can give for you is the Casey Anthony case. Regardless of what you think about her parents, I thought the witch hunt that happened on a daily basis outside their home was just the most horrible display of human behavior on the part of both the media and just people who would come down and hurl horrible accusations at George and Cindy. And again, let's keep out of it what we think about them, and let's keep in mind these are grandparents of a murdered grandchild whose daughter is standing trial for murder. No one's holding George and Cindy culpable for that crime. Ed being out there night after night was just irreprehensible. It was the worst display of human behavior. I was embarrassed for people. Yeah. I was ashamed to be part of the media circus for that. And within that, I have to try to rise above and continue to do responsible reporting. And it's hard because you've got the networks breathing down your neck. And, you know, if I tell them I'm going to report on, you know, a dirty ham sandwich I found that I think Casey Anthony ate in the garbage, they'd probably want me to do it, you know? So, you know, I have to be, you know, I have to edit at my level, Ed, because when people are hungry, they're going to jump at everything. And I think that's a perfect example of witch hunt in the media, what you're talking about with Vinny's show. And, you know, Vinny was getting good ratings, and I love Vinny. I think he's a great guy. Sometimes it's like the party, you wake up after the party from the hangover, and you're like, what the hell was I thinking?
The thing is, too, you got to meet the parents, George and Cindy Anthony. So you got to relate to them on a personal level, yeah. Yeah,
I spent extensive time with them in the home. Mark Furman and I investigating the backyard to the extent that I was asked to testify. I was on the witness list for the Casey Anthony case. The defense asked Cindy Anthony about myself and Mark Furman and our relationship, and questioned stories that she had told us. And, you know, they were considering bringing myself in. I don't know if they questioned Mark. I don't know. I was video depoted from New York. I was currently working on a show, so I couldn't make it to Orlando. I would have had to fly down had I been, you know, subpoenaed. But yeah, that was an interesting experience.
Yeah, that is interesting. I want to know exactly. I want to know the details. What exactly were they questioning you about?
The discussion was about, and again, you know, I wanted to. I'm going to tell you, gentlemen, because I don't remember specifics because it was a while ago. But it was about.
Anyway, so
okay. It was basically about. We had discussions about the pool ladder, whether the ladder was up or whether the ladder was down. I'm from Canada where we don't have a lot of above-ground pools. We have pools. So when Cindy had said to me, the ladder's up, there was just question about whether the ladder was up meant it was up and the child couldn't get into it, or it was down and the child had access to the pool. Getting to the bigger picture was Casey Anthony in the home with a boyfriend, which was one of the conversations, having some kind of sexual relationship, and neglectful, and the child went into the backyard and crawled up the pool ladder and drowned. That was the bigger picture that they were trying to look at. There was just confusion about when I was questioning her, so the ladder was up or the ladder was down, because when she came home, she said the ladder was down, in the down position. So they just wanted clarity about what up and down meant, and my understanding of what up and down was, and whether that story was consistent with what she had told them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because you being from Canada, that wouldn't make sense to you whether the ladder was up or down. Who knows?
I have a above-ground pool.
It's still under dispute. We don't know. Okay, I'm with my guest today, Steph Watts, who's been on some of the biggest trials in town, Court TV, HON, and don't forget, we're a listener-sponsored station, so in order to keep us going, you got to visit the website, freedomslips.com, and hit that donate button to keep us going. And we'll be back with Steph in about 3 or 4 minutes. All right, we're back to the Opperman Report. This is your host, Ed Opperman. By the way, I want to thank James Arthur Jancic for redoing my intro at the beginning of the show. He's the host of Feet to the Fire every Sunday night, and he's a really cool guy. I want to thank him for putting that together for me. So we have today with us Steph Watts, and he was just telling us about the Casey Anthony case, and he was saying something, Steph, I never heard this before, about how there's a theory that Casey Anthony was having sex in the house with a boyfriend when little Kaylee went into the pool?
Well, Casey Anthony was having sex with a lot of boyfriends.
Right.
just FYI, in case you didn't see any of the pictures. But yeah, that was one of the theories, conspiracy theories, rumors, facts that needed to be investigated. There's no proof that that ever happened, but it was certainly a sort of a neglect issue. Perhaps that's what happened. But if you look at the puzzle with, nobody's, you and I aren't just casually Googling chloroform and how to, kill somebody with chloroform. One thing that's always fascinated me about this case was I remember Mark Furman and I spent a lot of time behind the scenes with investigators, and they told us that there was extensive, and this is their words, not mine, extensive blood evidence in that trunk. And I don't know why that never came out at trial. If that was something that was suppressed, then that's what I'm talking about at the beginning of it. And that's something that should have been entered. I don't know what happened to that, but, it's such a frustrating case because to stand on the outside, it's so clear what happened in that case, and it's so frustrating that the jury couldn't reach a guilty verdict in that case.
How much was spent on that investigation? Do you remember?
Oh gosh, I can't give you a number. I do know that the defense received over $250,000 from media outlets, combined mostly ABC News, to pay for their defense. Which is sort of, you want to talk about the media getting way too involved. There's a perfect example of the media overstepping its boundaries in a criminal case. I still can't believe that there was no sort of bigger action taken on that part, but it is what it is.
Well, Steph, did you know that when they examined her cell phone, Casey Anthony's cell phone, that they didn't use a software tool that could recover deleted text messages? The only tool that they used just recovered what the data that was on the phone that you could see with your naked eye?
Yeah, and that's a huge mistake, particularly when somebody, as you know from your extensive work that you do, that somebody with that kind of mindset, someone with the mindset of Casey Anthony, these people are really, really smart, and they're the type of people that would delete extensive text messages. And the text messages that they're deleting, Ed, those are the ones that you want. The ones that are left behind are not the ones that you want to read. You know that. So, yeah, that was another huge mistake. I feel like I don't know what it was. Like, was the police department not trained enough? Were they not big enough? There's so many balls dropped on this, and they must have been aware that the eyes of the world, the nation, were on this case. And
well, you know, when I watched that trial on TV, and I, just like everybody else, I watched it all day long and I commented on it all day long. Especially when I saw some of the problems with the digital forensics, because everyone who was in the forensics business knew that the 84 searches for chloroform, everybody knew that was ridiculous and impossible, you know, because and we were all talking about it behind the scenes, and then later on it came out they admitted that was a big mistake. But I predicted that she would get a not guilty verdict in that trial. And my biggest problem is the medical examiner could not come up with a cause of death or a manner of death.
Yeah, I think that's a huge problem in this case, and I think the biggest problem was you can't leave it to the jury to connect the dots. If the state didn't put on a good case, they weren't strong enough. They didn't drive home the point, connect all the dots, put the pieces of the puzzle together for the jury. They didn't do that in this case, and they left, you know, small amounts of reasonable doubt. And, you know, I mean, where is the reasonable doubt in this case, Ed? I don't know. I don't see it. She's a complete nut job who led police on a goose chase on a job she didn't have. She spent months before she told anybody about her daughter being missing, including the mother. Like, it's just preposterous that this jury reached this verdict. It was just, but, you know, it's one of the cases that frustrates me the most. I have to be honest with you. It's such a frustrating verdict, and to know that she's out and will, you know, I always look at OJ. I'm like, God, let's hope and pray that she just, you know, reoffends at some point. Hopefully, doesn't have children.
So you seem to be really an advocate for the prosecution in almost every trial that you cover? Well,
that's an interesting.
And the reason why I ask why is because coming from a guy who would be like writing for the Village Voice, do you consider yourself to be like politically on the political scale, I would consider you to be like a liberal, wouldn't I?
You know what's funny, Ed? I'm going to tell you exactly what I am. I am constitutionally conservative. And, you know, I'm not from this country. I'm Canadian, but I've read the Constitution, and I would consider myself constitutionally conservative.
Okay.
But I have, you know, so if you, and people are confused by that for me because I live in New York and I'm this edgy guy that does all these things. But I think if people really understood the Constitution and took the time to read it, they would understand what I'm saying. I'm constitutionally conservative, and that's my stance. And I believe, if you read the Constitution, and I know you're a smart guy, that's the stance that I take. I believe in justice. I believe everybody deserves a fair trial. But I also don't believe that most of the time that you're sitting there defending yourself against murder if you didn't do it. I really, truly believe that. There is cases that happen, but we don't usually get to that point if you didn't do it.
I would agree with you. Hey, listen, I would agree with you. Listen, if you're sitting there on the hot seat, there's a reason why you're there.
You did something wrong after midnight, Ed.
But the thing is, though, but you have a right to a jury trial, and you have a right to a fair trial. And you know, and like you said, too, deals are made. You know, evidence can't get in, certain things can't get in, certain things that get in that shouldn't get in. So once you get there into the courtroom, everybody made their deal. That's the game we're playing, and you have the right to a vigorous defense. If you win that. Okay, like Casey Anthony did, you know what? Let's respect that and say, hey, you know what? She's not guilty. Let's not. What was that?
Oh, no, I lost you for a second there.
Well, I was on a rant. You should have heard me. It was great.
Yeah, I know. That's what I wanted to do to start again.
You would have agreed with every word. So let's just.
I don't know.
No, I'm saying that, like Casey Anthony, she did get a not guilty verdict. You know, they did the deal. They negotiated back and forth. Whatever evidence got in. She had a fair trial. The jury came back with their verdict, with a not guilty verdict. I agree with that verdict. That's the verdict I would have voted. Now, so once we have that, how can we turn around and say, just because we're on TV and say, well, it doesn't matter, she's guilty anyway?
Well, this is America. I mean, I'm entitled to my opinion. Do I respect the jury's decision? Not really, because I don't think it's the right decision. I don't think that they looked at the evidence. I don't think that they used their common sense, Ed. I don't understand how you could sit on that jury and be a mother, and look at this evidence and not come with a guilty verdict. Like, I don't understand. I'm thinking to myself, do I know more about this case than they do? And I have to blame the prosecution. I don't blame the jury, because I guess that they weren't intelligent enough to apply the law properly. And they have to be instructed on to apply the law, and they have to be led point by point on how to apply the law. So I think that they didn't understand how to apply the law. And because it's frustrating to me. There's no way I would have found her not guilty. With what I know, absolutely not in a million years. And that's my stance. It's one verdict that I don't agree with. And do I respect the jury? Not really, because I think they didn't reach the right verdict. So sorry, that's my point.
I got you.
I'm very opinionated on that one. So right? Yeah. So I don't know.
Another thing too now, because one of the things I noticed on your Facebook page was that you said that Nancy Grace wanted to put you through law school.
Nancy's wonderful. She's extremely protective and close to the people that she works with. And there was a time, I guess she realized that I on a common sense ground, have a legal mind. And she said to me, I remember where we were, it was in the radio room at Court TV, she said, if you want to go back to law school, I'll pay for it.
Wow.
I honestly think, Ed, that I just don't have the mind to get through law school and pass the bar. I'm more intuitive and, first of all, I love what I do as a journalist, to be able to ask questions and if I was going to do it again, would I do it? Probably at this point in my life. But yeah, Nancy did actually offer to put me through law school, and sometimes I have regrets about not taking her up on that offer. She's certainly done well for herself. Yeah.
But you're in a good position too, having your own production company. That's a great place to be in as well.
Yeah, I just started last year. What I'm trying to do is, because of my sort of insight into the crime and justice world, I want to try to take my knowledge, and I'm sort of trying to expand on, if you look at the market now, Investigation Discovery and a lot of the other channels are really interested in hour-long, longer format reality crime shows. So I'm trying to take my knowledge from inside the judicial system and my contacts and figure out what can I do to tell murder stories, the victims of stories, interesting crime stories in a different way and still hang on to the integrity of storytelling. And it's a complicated battle. I think ID is doing a really great job of that. They've certainly got the audience, and I'm certainly hoping to continue to work with them. I love the work that they do. It's telling stories in this modern day is a battle because people want sensationalistic stories, and they want them to be told in a sensationalistic way. So that's a battle that I try to fight, because I consider myself to be a fairly conservative storyteller, old-fashioned journalist, old-fashioned beliefs. But anyways, it is what it is.
It sounds like a dream job, that I would love to be involved in. Now
it is.
Yeah. But now when you do something like that, how do you get the funding to put all that together?
Well, it's, you pitch ideas to the networks, and they like the idea, and they sign off on, 6 episodes or 10 episodes. So the network, they pay for the production. That's how it works. That's how the machine works. That's no secret. I'm not revealing anything that anybody doesn't know. What I love about what I do is being able to travel the country and speak to some of the top law enforcement officials, prosecutors, occasionally judges, the victims' family members, victims themselves sometimes if they've survived, and on occasion, face-to-face, more than once, face-to-face with a killer. My favorite part clearly is talking to the victims' family members, and it's extremely dramatic and emotional. I have to take them back to a place that they don't want to go, to that day of that murder, the exact moments, what happened, including prosecutors, witnesses, and they have to trust me, and that place has to be, or we're not going to get the story out there. They're not going to talk to me. And, when you walk in that room, all you have, Ed, is your reputation. That's all I have. At the end of the day is the second I call somebody nowadays, first thing they do is they Google me. They know exactly who I am. And, that becomes problematic because in this electronic world, I can say anything I want about you. I can hang up from the show and say, Ed was a jerk. Put it online there, and Ed, that electronic footprint is never leaving.
Well, we've already said that about each other on Facebook.
I've never said that about you.
I know.
No, but you understand what I'm saying.
Absolutely.
We live in a world where we leave an electronic footprint, and unfortunately, people realize that. And even during these trials, and people can put out a conspiracy theory about Jodi Arias or say whatever we want. So everybody has to be really aware, hyper aware, Ed, that just because it's on Facebook's news feed, Ed, doesn't make it news, doesn't make it true. If it seems funny, if it doesn't seem right, if your gut tells you there's something wrong with it, question it. Don't believe everything that's online. Everybody's got to have a little bit of journalistic instinct if you're going to be involved in that world, because it's a dangerous society that we live in when we have Ed online where anybody can say anything.
Oh yeah, there's so many ridiculous hoaxes out there that people are just repeating like nonsense. It's unbelievable. But back on the topic though. Now, how much editorial and creative control do you lose when you go into these networks who seem to have an agenda? When you go into them to fund your project, like how much do you lose when you go in there to the time you leave?
I don't think you lose anything. I think the networks have integrity in storytelling. I think if you look at it, there's different ways to tell a story, and I think this is the most simplistic way. They can come to you with a formula of, I'm going to give you an example. My show, Deadly Devotions. Deadly Devotions Season 1, we did 10 episodes of, the concept of the show was people who got involved in subcultures or cults or underground worlds who ended up dead. That was the formula. The formula is, and it's not a complicated formula. They can come to us, this is the idea we have. Is there cases around people who get caught up in subcultures? And there were some really fantastic cases, dramatic cases of people who were murdered, who got involved in the Hare Krishna, who were murdered in Hare Krishna. People who went involved in Hell's Angels, who got caught up and murdered in Hell's Angels. People who were involved in, the Amish, the lifestyle who were murdered, all this culture. So yeah, it's like a puzzle. You're not going to force a case into that formula that does fit. And the sad part is,
I think we might have lost them.
I get thousands of emails like, my brother's missing. I have this. Oh, I'm here. Did you lose me?
No, we got you now.
Ed, can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you really good right now.
Oh, there we go. Sorry, I don't know what happened, but yeah, what I was saying is, they have a formula for particular shows, and you have to meet the criteria for that formula. But as far as integrity, they're very interested in telling the story as accurate as they can. Now, one thing I know you're a crime and justice junkie as well. We're getting into a lot of the recreations of murders. So they've always kind of done that, Ed. Now it's driving the storytelling, and that's a little bit of an area that we need to be careful of, because recreations get into acting and fantasy language, and I'm not real crazy about that. I prefer the shows that don't have the speaking recreations part, but it's part of the beast, and you have to do what you have to do.
Yeah, I got you. Okay, we got about 8 minutes before the break. Okay, so I'd like to get into your relationship with Mark Fuhrman, how you met him. Did you know him when he was working? Mark Fuhrman was working on the Skakel. He got the Skakel thing reopened, no?
Yeah, Mark. Yeah, and I knew Mark well after Skakel. How I met Mark was he was under contract with Fox News when I arrived there, and Mark was a continual contributor for Greta Van Susteren. I worked directly on Greta's show, directly for Greta, in the field with Greta, traveled with Greta. She's fantastic. Love Greta to this day. She's great. Very, very good, solid journalist and solid reporter, and a great attorney. I can't say enough good things about her. But anyways, Mark was one of the contributors for Fox. Mark was, he wanted to sort of expand his role, and then I came in as sort of the investigative producer, and they just paired us up. It was like sort of a match made in heaven. And Ed, I learned so much from being in the field with Mark, because Mark, was stripped of his opportunities to investigate as a police officer, and because of the O.J. Simpson case. At Fox News, he began to sort of get deep inside some of the cases, particularly Drew Peterson, that we worked on together. Right. And I learned so much from him, just sitting in the car with him, and we almost became these partners. We spent so much time, like, sitting in the cars, in the truck, freezing our butts off, talking to people, I'm going to ambush Drew Peterson, speaking to family members. And there's a case, Ed, and I'd love to use this as an example of where we found documentation early on in a case, right after Stacey Peterson went missing. I'll tell you the story exactly as it happened quickly. Go ahead. Stacey Peterson went missing. I'm assigned to the case, Mark's assigned to the case. We rushed out there like all the media did. It's a big missing person story, pretty girl missing, husband's a cop, blah, blah, blah. Stacey Peterson, her daughter's name is Lacey. Lacey Peterson was murdered, and the other Scott Peterson, there's all these weird connections. Her best friend of the missing, I see a woman sitting in the corner with dark hair, and I just said to her, "Who's that woman?" And she said, "That's Kathleen Savio's sister. Drew probably murdered her too." So as a journalist, I'm like, let's go over there. So I went and talked to her, and she said, "My wife was married to Drew. She died. They claim she died accidentally in the bathtub. It wasn't an accident. He killed her, and I have a box at home to prove it." Myself, Greta's like, "Steph, get over there." Mark and I go through the box. In that box, amongst all her letters she'd written to the cops about domestic abuse complaints and charges she filed against him, was the autopsy report. We took back to Dr. Bodden. Dr. Bodden looks at the Kathleen Savio autopsy report and says, "This wasn't an accident. This is clearly a homicide." Based on our reporting, and Dr. Bodden going on air, and Fox having the balls to put him on air, they reopened the case, separate autopsy, which on behalf of Fox News, not influenced by the media, strictly for the family. And ultimately, he was charged with murder. The case was reopened, reinvestigated, charged with murder, and now he sits charged behind bars because of the Kathleen Savio case. Stacey Peterson case is wide open, Ed, still not solved, never found her body. So there's an example of how bringing information through the media can put pressure on law enforcement and state officials to reopen a case and actually bring justice to a family.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Okay, when you put a spotlight on these local police stations, they'll get off their butt and start working on a case, and I would appreciate that with you there. That's right. Very good. But aren't you a little worried that Drew Peterson may get out and come looking for you?
I don't think he's getting out. I don't think he's getting. And then let me make it clear: it was a team effort. There was myself, Mark Furman. There was Greta. Clearly, Greta driving the ship. She's incredible. Right. We had Corey, and we had other. It was a team of us working on this. Clearly, Mark and I were the main two guys on the ground. Greta, the face behind this, the driving force. So it was a team effort, but we certainly. It was one of the stories that I'm most proudest of.
Oh, no, you should be. You should be.
Yeah, I saw change, and I'll never forget the day the verdict came down on the Kathleen Savio when Drew Peterson was charged with her murder. Jury found him guilty. 2 minutes later, Ed, I got a text from the family.
Wow.
Simply saying thank you.
Excellent.
Meant the world to me. Meant the world to me. That they've remembered what we did for them, and that made it all worth it. All the bullshit that I went through, because I had to testify in that case as well.
Oh, so really? Okay, we'll get to that when we get back after this break. I want to hear about that. Okay, we're on with Steph Watts, man, investigative reporter, TV producer, production company, crime fighter. Listen to this guy. This guy's putting people in prison. I better be careful. But we'll be back after the break with more Steph Watts. Thank you. Okay, we're back with the Opperman Report. And I'm your host, Ed Opperman. I want to remind everybody that this is a listener-sponsored station. If you want to keep the station going, you got to click that donate button and visit freedomslips.com and donate to the station and keep us going. So we can have great guests like Steph Watts on here we have today. Oh. So, Steph, you were just telling us, okay, because people don't realize we got to pay Steph Watts to come on our show. Okay.
I'm getting paid?
Yeah, oh, yeah. You got the check's in the mail, bro. Okay, Steph.
Well, that changes everything. I'm coming on everything.
Otherwise, you wouldn't be nice to me. Listen, finish up with Drew Peterson. You were telling us about how you testified in the trial.
Well, it's truly one of the craziest stories of my life. So what happened was, as I always tell people, this was the situation. The family, so the state exhumes the body. Right. So and I had clearly developed a very close relationship with Kathleen Savio's family, who is one of the most wonderful families. And I'm going to tell you why, Ed. They never asked for a dime. They didn't ask for anything. No money, never wanted, they just wanted justice. And I really, really appreciated that about them. So anyways, when the body was being exhumed, they came to me and they said, we don't really trust the state because they screwed it up the first time. And I said, I can understand the family. They're not, well, they don't, they're scraping by. So they had said to me, we wish we could afford our own autopsy. So, of course, my wheels get turning, and I said, let me see what I can do. So I went back to the network and to Dr. Bodden and said, would you do this for the family? And Dr. Bodden said, sure. And the network said, he can do it as long as he reports fairly and honestly about what his findings are either way, whether it was an accident or whether it was a homicide. So I went back to the family and said, here's the deal. Dr. Bodden will do it, but we have to be able to report on it however he concludes it accurately. And they were fine with that. That was the deal. So then I went one step further and I said, would you guys mind if I was in the room? I said, I'd like to film Dr. Bodden with my camera, just him, B-roll, Ed, B-roll, just Dr. Bodden walking across the room, establishing that he was there. Never film the body, never show, of course, I would never do that. They agreed to that. That would allow us, when we had Dr. Bodden on, to show B-roll on the show that night. You know how it goes. Yeah. So, long story short, jump ahead. We do that. We jump ahead. Dr. Bodden's called in. Now they're trying to, at prelim, they're trying to establish whether Dr. Bodden's credible and should be allowed to testify in front of the jury. Dr. Bodden, I think he slipped up, Ed, and said that I touched the body or helped him. Oh, really? And you know how a caseless defense can grasp onto anything. So it turned out that, and of course I take extensive notes. That's what I do. And this story's about to get really interesting. You're going to love this. I don't think I've ever told you this before. So I take extensive notes. So they subpoenaed my notes and then called me in. The defense was trying to make a sort of a mockery out of it, saying that it was done for entertainment purposes. It was completely not credible, that I was in there and I helped with the autopsy. I touched the body, assisted Dr. Bodden. Worst thing that happened, Ed, was I had got back to my office, put my notes on my desk, and this was sloppy on my part, turned my notes over, took phone messages. One of the phone messages was from Joe Francis from Girls Gone Wild.
Oh, my God.
Had written Joe's new cell phone number on the back of the autopsy notes. When they subpoenaed the notes, they had seen that it said Joe Francis, called the number, realized it was Joe, and then decided that I had attempted to sell the videotape to Joe Francis from Girls Gone Wild. There was absolutely no connection to Mr. Francis other than the fact that I had just worked on Joe's legal case for Fox News, and Joe was following up with me. So they went crazy with this. The press went crazy with this. I got caught in the middle and felt like an idiot. Explaining it to you, you're an intelligent person. I know you understand the disconnect, but I also can understand the chaos that created.
But I can also understand how the defense would jump on that. Are you kidding me?
They don't have a case.
Yeah.
the something shiny over here, and I gave them something shiny over here. I was sloppy. I should never have written, it's a really bad habit of mine. I write on everything.
Yeah.
Like I write on, a napkin if it's whatever's in front of me, and I've really tried to stop doing that. That case was sort of changing on it, but that's just what I do because I'm sort of that sort of scattered kind of journalist kind of guy. Sometimes, I just write on everything. So, anyways, that was an exciting moment in my career.
Well, that Drew Peterson defense team, they were a bunch of showboaters anyway. They loved the camera.
Oh, there you go. There's an example of what you're trying to say is the truth. That's honesty. That's exactly what happened. I mean, he went into this case loving the limelight. I mean, what's his name?
I don't remember either, yeah.
Slipped my mind out, which is probably a good thing. Joel Brodsky, I mean, he took this case because it was a high-profile case. He loved the limelight, but he was also the one who put the defense attorney, that he put on the divorce attorney on the stand. I mean, he blew this case. This was a case, Ed, that you actually could have created reasonable doubt. There was no DNA evidence. It was all circumstantial in that case. And there was a case that I was really worried about that case. I'm going to be honest with you. I didn't know whether or not they were going to get a conviction. There's a case where the jury sat back and said, okay, let's look at this history. Let's look at this guy. Nobody dies in a bathtub. There's no one slips. He was the first one on, the crime scene. There's a case where the jury used their common sense and really brought justice to a family. The sad part, the sad part is that they screwed this case up the first time. Had this case have been, carefully tried and convicted the first time, Stacey Peterson wouldn't be dead and missing. Stacey Peterson would not be dead and missing. If they had have done it right the first time, they should never have classified this as a murder. It should have been, as an accident. It should have been classified as a murder, and it wasn't.
But didn't Drew Peterson have an interesting history with the cops over there? He was like a vice cop for a while, and I think he got kicked off of vice because of some suspicion. And that guy had a ton of money with a lot of different businesses going on. So what went on there?
Drew Peterson was, and I don't mean to be disrespectful in the usage of this word, he was a dirty pig. Drew Peterson was the dirtiest of dirty cops. Drew Peterson owned a bar. Drew Peterson was running drugs out of that bar. Drew Peterson was aware of, he was doing stuff, Ed, that was, just unspeakable and unacceptable and should never have been on that police force and should have been convicted of that murder the first time. And here's another story. Drew Peterson was married 4 times. I spoke to his second wife. He tried to kill her, too. Wow. He cut the brake lines in her car, and she was in a horrible car accident. And guess what, Ed? Guess who was the first person on the scene of that accident?
Drew Peterson?
Drew Peterson.
Wow.
Unfortunately, she lived. Fortunately, she lived, but man, she's one scared woman who really didn't want to talk to us. But man, that case gets my blood going.
Yeah, but no, of course. But other cops were afraid of him too, and which is probably why he got away with all this stuff all along.
Yeah, you're right. And I'll tell you something, Ed. It's really interesting because when I first met him with Greta, I never remember. Greta and I went into the house, and he agreed to talk to us. He was so scarily convincing that she had left. He had little pill bottles on his desk that he'd placed, Ed, and he sat to us and he said, Stacey was on these, she was taking all these pills, holding up bottles. She was a real pill popper. Ed, he was so completely convincing. Greta and I both walked out of there like, I don't know. At the very, very beginning, I'm going to be honest with you, we were both like, I don't know, maybe she just left. Maybe we need to be careful with this. Maybe this is one of those cases. Then, Ed, we go next door to the neighbor's house, and everything changed. The story completely changed after that. But man, he was a convincing psychopath.
Yeah, he's a charming guy. He has a charming way about him.
Charming is a good word for him. It's charming, manipulative, scary, controlling. abusive. But yeah, charming is a good word for him. It's a good word choice. Yeah.
Okay, speaking of charming, let's get into Joe Francis real quick because you brought him up. He's connected to this trial. Now, you said you were involved in Joe Francis's legal problems. This guy's had more litigation than I can't even imagine. Hit us with that.
Well, I'll tell you something. When I left the networks and went freelance, it was sort of a freeing experience because I could do or say whatever I want. And Joe was on trial in Florida for allegedly using underage girls in his videos. And Ed, I'm going to be honest with you, it was a really, really interesting trial. As far as it was probably the most interesting non-murder, non-violent case I did. And Joe, I call him a mad genius. So here's what happened. And I'll try to keep it short because it's really complicated. So Joe decides to defend himself. I'll be the first one to say, when you're defending yourself, you've got a fool for an attorney. You and I both know that is not the way to go. So, but Joe is a genius in his own mind, and he's a smart guy. He really is a smart guy. He's crazy, but he's smart. Love Joe, but he's a little crazy. You know that. I'll tell him that to his face. So anyways, he asked me to come down and just sort of be with him and write some stuff on his behalf, and sort of, I think he just wanted me more there because he knew I was familiar with the courtroom, and he also knew I could kind of advise him and calm him down. Really thought long and hard about it, Ed. I said, is this going to put me in a weird position? And I thought, you know what? The hell with it. He's my friend. I'm not contracted with anybody right now. And, I'm going to go down there and I'm going to do this. And it was so weird because I literally...
Wait, let me interrupt. Did he have anybody else? Any other staff advising him? Anybody?
No. Well, he had people from his office, but Joe doesn't listen to anybody. But I told him if I was going to come down there, he did listen to me. He took my advice. And this is no word of a lie. I don't know how this... He had the defendants all had this big law firm from Chicago, who some of them knew me from my work there because I had covered Peterson, I had covered Blagojevich. I was based out of there for a year, so they knew who I was. And I was actually in the room and helped him select the jury. This is no word of a lie. I was back behind closed doors with the judge, the defense team, and it was me and Joe. And I went through and I did character studies of the jury, and I picked. And Joe's like, they're all women. And I'm like, let's just go with this. It was 12 extremely conservative women. And my thinking of it is, Joe, it's going to go other one way. They're not going to like you, but they're also not going to like these girls because I've done my stories on them. And long story short, Joe was almost held in contempt of court, and Joe was out of line, and Joe was theatrical, and Joe was dramatic. And finally, we secured a local husband and wife team when the judge was really threatening to put Joe in jail because Joe's great, but he had a lot of crazy outbursts in court. One of the smartest things he ever did. So basically, these girls were after money.
Wait, is there any film of this trial?
No.
Oh my God, it would be gold.
You know what? I'm telling you something. I wish it was on camera because I can't even, I'm not even going to explain to you the fireworks in that court, Ed. I have never in my life seen anything so heated, and it was fascinating to be in there, and I kept thinking to myself, I can't believe that this isn't being covered. So the most interesting thing was, one of the girls claimed that she was going to go to law, she was going to go to school she was studying geometry, and because of this situation of her being filmed and the nude films of her coming out, that she was so traumatized that she couldn't finish geometry school. This is how smart Joe is. She made this claim. What the jury didn't know is that she was a porn star. There was something that was being held out. She was actually doing porn. Joe stands up and says to her, "What's the right triangle?" She says, "Pardon me?" She goes, "What's the right triangle?" She says, "I have no idea." He goes, "If you're studying geometry, basic geometry, anybody should know what a right triangle was." It was genius. It was absolutely genius. And I'm going to jump ahead. Joe almost gets thrown in jail. Shocker. Joe hires a local husband and wife team to finish the trial, wrap up, and they did the smartest thing that they could do, and they said, I know you don't like Joe, We don't like him either. Let me tell you something. The jury found in his favor. It was a $14 million lawsuit. These defense attorneys spent, these prosecutors stated they spent years on this case, and they lost to Joe and his crazy antics, and me in the chair beside him. I got kicked out of the chair. They told me that I wasn't a lawyer and I had to go back the thing. And then they brought in his husband and wife team, and it was really exciting to be a part of that. It was really interesting because really at the end of the day, these girls, however, I believe some of them were underage, signed waivers and posed willingly. And Ed, we're talking about like they flashed their boobs. It wasn't like they were on the streets, and the lawsuit was frivolous. And Joe is a target for these kind of suits because of his personality and because everybody knows he has so much money, you know, and they know if they get him into court that he's going to act like a crazy person. It's true.
So that was a civil trial. He was being sued for money damages.
Correct. Yes, correct.
Okay.
Let me make that clear. That was a civil trial.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. So, but now he's had so much other litigation. What would make Joe think? You're his friend. Okay. Why would he want to go up against Steve Wynn in a Las Vegas courtroom?
That's a tough question to answer. I think you and I don't have, I'm assuming you don't, I don't know much about you. I'm going to take you out of that equation. I don't have 14, 16, 20, $45 million in assets and accessible to. I think, Ed, from what I can understand, is that makes you fearless.
Yeah.
And I think it also, Steve Wynn is the same way, and I think it becomes a situation where it's like a sword fight. You know, these two guys they hate each other. They realize they're going to get the attention, and neither one of them is going to back down because they can afford to. You and I can't afford to do that. We would, lose our shirts. And I think it becomes about ego. I also think that, within that, it becomes dangerous because it becomes intoxicating. And, I think Joe may have gotten a little, there's certain things that you need to let go and move on from them. And there's a couple instances where that would have been my suggestion to him as his friend.
Yeah. Now, he's facing jail time right now, isn't he?
Yeah, he is. And I'm going to be honest with you. I've been in LA the last couple of times and I haven't heard from him.
Right.
And I don't know what's going on as of late. I pray for him because I know him personally and he's a wonderful guy. He really is a heartfelt guy who, will do anything for anybody. I feel like, he could certainly use some clarity and some guidance in his life, and I'm there for him. I have visited him in jail, and I will do it again. And, I think when we have an opportunity to do greatness, there's things in life that can get us off track, and I hope Joe just gets back on track and finds his way and calls me, and we can, I don't want to say be friends again. We're friends. I love Joe. I love what he stands for. I love that he's fearless. It's funny. I always admired that about him. Like, he's so fearless about everything. And I love that because it's like, I just love people like that are fearless like that.
Well, now, the charges he's convicted of right now are tax related? What are they?
No. The charges he's convicted of now, and I don't know exactly the details of it, so I want to make sure I get it right because it was a case that I didn't follow. But 3 young women, I believe, came to his home. Let me just take a look at this. And now he was ordered to serve 270 days, which is like almost a year if you think about it. So I'm not sure where he's at with that. But from what I understand is he was charged with it's an assault charge on 3 young women that came home to him one night at a party in L.A. 36 months. He's also sent 36-month probation. Blah, blah, blah. I just want to check the charges right, because I don't want to, he's on $250,000 bond right now. But, again, the charges, Joe is a target. One of the girls claims that Joe choked and slammed her, on the floor. And again, these are, Joe is a crazy guy. He's a lot of fun. Women can see that as an opportunity to perhaps make money. But you got to be smart enough to know, Ed, that when you're in that position, you are a target, and you have to be super cautious. And sometimes Joe isn't.
Well, he was a crime victim. He was actually kidnapped.
Yes.
And abused on video. Then they tried to blackmail him, and then Paris Hilton's friend was somehow involved in this, and she turned in the friend, and that's a fascinating story as well. So the whole life of Joe Francis.
Joe's got a fascinating life. I keep telling him he should be a reality show, or he should at least do a documentary. I mean, he is not dissimilar to Larry Flint.
Yeah.
I mean, Joe just, I hope he can sort of get through all this garbage, because he really has. I've seen him up close and personal. He really has the potential to do greatness. He's a huge fighter for human rights. He'll march on Washington. He'll be the first one to, say to his. He's like, he didn't get married until gay people could get married in his state. Like, he's just a real advocate for people and basic human rights. And unfortunately, that sometimes gets lost in the garbage press. But I'm hoping Joe can continue to do good that he does, and I will continue to stand by him and call him a friend.
Well, that's great, man. Maybe you could do some kind of documentary or something about that trial down in Florida, the one you participated in. That would be great.
I know, right? It is. When I tell you, I forget about it. It was such a crazy story. I wish I had filmed it, man. I'm telling you, it was crazy.
Yeah, that would have been great. That's gold. That stuff is gold.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, now we got about 5 or 6 minutes. We have 3 minutes left. What do you want to do in 3 minutes?
3 minutes. Wow, man.
3 minutes and another half hour after that.
Oh, okay, 3 minutes. We're on Vandersloot. We got to talk about the Trayvon Martin case.
Vandersloot. Let's go into Vandersloot. What do you got him?
Right. It's another case of someone who got away with murder, but, a psycho like that is going to reoffend. Now, I spent time with him overseas. I spent personal time with him, a week face-to-face with him in Thailand, where I sat and, talked to him and was in my hotel with me, and we did things together, and I shopped with him and had dinner with him, and it was such a weird experience, Ed. It was because everyone was like, what's he like? And I said, well, let me put it to you this way. If I didn't know he murdered somebody, I would think he was a really nice guy, and I liked hanging out with him. I mean, I got to be honest with you. It was the weirdest experience of my life.
Another charming guy like Drew Peterson.
But this guy was, this guy had an agenda with me, though. The agenda was, he claims he had new information on the Natalie Halloway case that he was attempting to sell to the media, and we were certainly interested, Fox News, in licensing anything that he had that could potentially help bring justice to the family. And my job was to find out what it was he had, find out whether or not it was legitimate, and find out whether it was worth licensing for the purposes of justice, not for the purposes of being sensationalistic. And I'm going to be really clear. Fox was really good about that, and they were really clear about that.
Gotcha.
So yeah, that was an interesting experience. He now sits behind jail, sadly, for the murder of Stephanie Flores, another young girl who he met and brutally attacked and murdered in his hotel room, and tried to get away with that, left the hotel room, sloppy crime scene, sloppy murder. His dad wasn't around to help him cover it up or clean it up. The protection of the Aruba government and his father's influential friends weren't around, and here's an example of someone who got caught, who deserves to be where he is and will hopefully remain in a Peruvian jail the rest of his life. Yeah,
but I understand he has a pretty easy ride right now in that Peruvian jail, no?
I think he just got married, and I understand he's going to be a father.
Yeah.
From what I hear, I mean, these are. It's just shocking how these people can continue to sort of, live some kind of a life while the victims lay dead 6 feet under. It's really sad.
Well, where do you think all the money came in? Because I heard he was involved in a lot of stuff, gambling and drugs and stuff like that, and even he was doing a lot of date rape down there in Aruba.
I understand that to be true too, and I understand Aruba is a place where young women go to for vacation, and him and his friends knew that would be a way for them to enjoy themselves and get women, was through the date rape drug or getting drunk or high on cocaine or intoxicated, whatever their means or methods were. We're not 100% sure, but those were certainly all the rumors. And I did.
All right, we got a break. We'll be back with Steph Watts about 3 minutes. Okay, we're back with the Opperman Report. And we're back with our guest, Steph Watts, crime fighter, investigative reporter.
Why are you laughing?
friends of Joe Francis, Steph Gone Wild. We got the whole thing going on here. But don't forget, we got the listener-sponsored station. You got to support the station. Otherwise, no one talks. No one gets to hear anything. You go to the website, freedomslips.com, and you click the donate button. And the archive is going to be up on YouTube next week, so you can catch Steph's interview next week. So, Steph, you wanted to talk about Martha Moxley. What do you got? Well,
I mean, I'm going to have to be honest with you. I'm sort of an outside observer on this case. I didn't work on it, but it was certainly interesting. And, of course, I know you're going to have Vito on next week, but, man, a retrial, based on ineffective counsel. I call this, Ed, the problems of the benefits of rich white people because, it seems so late, so after the fact for this, but I can understand that there were perhaps some issues with the defense in this case. So it's going to, but this trial is this case. It's just like this obsession with this story is so interesting. It's such a, it's Martha Moxley was like pre-Casey Anthony and pre all these other cases. It was a big story of Dominic Dunn and Mark Furman and, all these characters were involved in this case. I had the funniest conversation with Vito Colucci this morning. And Vito's like, yeah, I talked to the guy at the bookstore. I saw them over there moving Mark's book from true crime to the fiction section. I said, ouch, that really hurts. But, a judge ruled that he had ineffective counsel, so I guess here we go again. Unbelievable, right, after all these years.
Yeah, I didn't read the transcripts yet, but it's not just ineffective counsel. I understand there's a lot of prosecutorial misconduct in there as well. No?
Yeah, it was on both parts. The questioning of the questioning of witnesses, and I guess both sides. I don't know. I mean, does it change the fact that she was murdered? Does it change the fact that anyone actually believes that he did this? It doesn't for me, from what I can see. I'm going to be interested to watch this from the outside. What are your thoughts on this case? I know you're close to it.
Well, I wanted to ask you this: did you ever talk to Mark Furman about it?
You know what's funny? Mark and I, not really. We didn't really talk that much. I mean, he did tell me some sort of loose stories about, just I'm looking forward to hearing from Mark again. Clearly, Mark is great at his job and knows what he's talking about, and is going to probably come forward and be put in a position to defend his findings in his book, particularly now with what's been ruled. It's sort of the case that was tried and adjudicated, and justice has been served, and I hadn't really paid much attention to it. All these years later now, I get a call from Vito in the middle of the night almost, beyond excited, and he said, we're getting a retrial. I'm like, Vito, what the hell are you talking about? What case? And Martha Moxley, and I'm like, oh, I'll be damned. I said, I'm really surprised. So,
I got to tell you, I trust Vito, man. He's not, he's not the kind of guy to just take a case for a buck. And also, too, Pat Brown, the criminal profiler, she seems to think that there was a bad conviction in his case as well.
Well, from what I understand from my research that I've done on it, it was witnesses were showing up, not clear on what they were going to talk about. They weren't prepped. You prep your witnesses. They apparently there were times Mickey Sherman hadn't spoken to any of them. One of the biggest issues, from what I understand, this is clearly favorable to the prosecution, not to the defense, was they had an active police officer on the jury who was friends with the original investigator of the Martha Moxley case. Why would Mickey Sherman ever agree to have that person on the jury? He should have been thrown up. And from what I understand, Mickey was so, this goes back to our initial conversation, Mickey was apparently, and I like Mickey, and I don't want to, speak bad about him, but he was caught up in the media circus, he was caught up in the attention, he was really loving all the attention he was getting from this, and otherwise, how would this cop, active duty cop, be on a juror? What defense attorney wants that on their case? I wouldn't.
Yeah, that's unheard of. Yeah, that's remarkable. I didn't even hear about that.
Yeah, friends with the original investigator, and apparently, the other issue was, he was real close with the other team. Mickey Sherman was always hanging out with, the prosecutors and Martha's mom, and there was sort of this weird sort of connection that I think there were serious grounds for ineffective counsel able to say, he was in it more for the stardom of it. And, we've got to remember he made $1.5 million on this trial, and then he ultimately got charged with tax evasion and went to jail for a year.
Who did, Mickey Sherman?
Yeah, Mickey did a year in jail on tax evasion because of the money he made off this case. Don't you remember that?
No, I didn't follow this that close. They just really got into this because I know Vito's involved in it.
You have Vito. I don't want to ruin Vito's thunder, but yeah, he's going to talk to you about all that. Is he coming on next week?
Yeah, he's coming. I was just on his show. I'm going to be on his show this Sunday night. We just taped it Monday, and he just talked about my stuff. And then he's going to be on my show next week. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, he'll tell you all about that. Yeah, Mickey Sherman did a year in jail for tax evasion. On taxes he didn't pay on the $1.5 million he made on this trial. Other things as well.
Right.
So, but anyways, that's certainly going to be interesting. I'm wondering how the media attention is going to be on that, because it's an older case and it resonates with an older audience. So I'm wondering, I don't know if it's going to have the impact second time around as it did, if it's going to resonate with the younger audience. Although it has the Kennedy connection, and anything like that seems to warrant attention, doesn't it?
Yeah, and plus you got the Mark Furman book and everything, and plus Mickey Sherman's still around. He's on TV all the time. And Vito's all over the place. I was at
a party with Mickey at the Court TV reunion party. Mickey was there. I said hello to him. So
you got all the usual suspects. I'm sure it'll get some play on TV. Okay, so let's finish up now. We got about 20 minutes left. Now, I just want to let the audience know that when I was talking to Steph about booking this show, I said to him, Steph, what do you want to talk about? What do you want to promote? What are you promoting? And the first thing he said to me was, I want to talk about injustice. And then he mentioned right away the Trayvon Martin case and also the Casey Anthony case, which is, guys, I talk to a lot of people, and people want to promote their book. And Steph came on here. He wanted to talk about injustice. And me and Steph have had some really fiery debates on this Trayvon Martin case. So what do you got, Steph? Where do you want to go?
Well, I just feel like, I don't even know where to begin. I'm going to tell you, I remember, I was going to cover the case, and I just, unfortunately, fortunately I was blessed to be, working and under contract with ID and buried in a show, and I was really sort of disappointed that I wasn't able to be down there because I knew this was going to be a historical trial. And I live in Pennsylvania, but I also have a home in New York City, and I live in Harlem. And I remember I wanted to be home by myself that night waiting for the verdict. Because I knew what was going to happen. I knew what was coming, but I was not expecting a not guilty. And I have to tell you, Ed, it broke my heart. There's no disputing that George Zimmerman killed Trayvon Martin. No one's disputing that. But the story gets so thwarted with who did what, and I just don't see how an unarmed young man who was at his father's home in a gated community on his way home from the store to get Skittles ends up shot dead. Ed, you and I get into heated discussions and get into a heated argument. I can't pull a gun on you and say, I felt threatened, so he deserved it. That's not fair. I don't believe that Trayvon Martin attacked George Zimmerman. I believe Trayvon Martin was trying to mind his. I believe George Zimmerman was a zealous wannabe cop who should never have had a gun, who should never have shot and killed Trayvon Martin. That's what I truly believe, and I know you know where I stand on this.
Sure. But now the thing is, but Zimmerman did have injuries to the back of his head and a broken nose. Let me
tell you something. You would have had injuries too to the back of. I'm not going to use you. I'm going to use George Zimmerman. George Zimmerman would have had more than injuries to the back of his head had he come after me and was trying to kill me with a gun. I would have defended myself to my death, which is what I believe happened. And of course you're going to have injuries. Absolutely there was a struggle between those two. There's no doubt about it. So come on, Ed, he's going to have wounds. He's going to have damages, but it doesn't warrant him pulling a gun and killing him. He has to look at his culpability. He should never have gotten out of the car. He should not have pursued him. He was told not to pursue him. It's not his job. And realistically, that kid wasn't doing anything wrong. I could understand if Trayvon had been charged with breaking into houses if there'd been a past. I don't care about his marijuana smoking in the past. I don't care about all that stuff. We didn't hear about George Zimmerman's past, about the all the abuse in his past, and now it's coming out now after the trial because he can't control himself. I'm concerned, Ed, that he's going to reoffend. I really am. He's driving around in a pickup truck with a loaded gun already. His wife charged him, pressed charges against him, has gotten him out of the house. So he sounds like a ticking time bomb. The verdict broke my heart, though. It really did. Part of me didn't want to believe it, but I knew it was coming.
Well, yeah. I definitely predicted that there would be a not guilty verdict in that trial in advance. Now,
it was a sad day in America, as far as I'm concerned. It was a sad day in America, and and it was interesting because I was really expecting. I live in a high-rise in Harlem, in the Doorman building, and I was expecting riots. I was expecting the OJ. I was expecting what happened after what was it in my brain's dead. Rodney King, thank you. Rodney King case. And Ed,
you're not even old enough for Rodney King.
I know. Well, that's why
remember that. Yeah.
I had to get you to remind me. But I'm just kidding. But what it was, there was a dead silence.
Right.
It was so silent, and I could feel the consecutive sigh of sadness. And I know not everybody agrees with me, and I know there's, the jury spoke and he got off. But personally, I just feel like it was an injustice, and I felt like, and I'm going to tell you something, Ed. I live in a city where stop and frisk. Now there's been a clampdown on it, but I've seen young African American men in my neighborhood where I live pulled over and frisked for nothing because they dress a certain way, and it's so humiliating for these young men to go through that. My heart broke when I actually witnessed it, and people hear about stop and frisk, but they don't understand it until you actually see it. And you know what, Ed? They're not stopping and frisking me. And I live in Harlem. I live in the neighborhood. I'm part of that community, and I'm gonna stay there. I love Harlem. I love living there. I'm gonna buy there. I'm raised a family there. It's a great, beautiful part of New York. It's Renaissance, and it's historical. So it's sad to see that, and I just feel like there is an injustice in the system towards people of color.
There is. There absolutely is. But I don't see that in this case. Now, I'm originally from New York, and I grew up.
I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah, right. You can't tell?
Yeah, I can hear it now. I hear it. Oh, yeah, you're from
I thought you were kidding. Yeah, I grew up in the Bronx. Bronx, then moved to Staten Island. And I was with the Yippies in New York City, Lower East Side, with Al Sharpton. Al Sharpton's an old friend of mine, Reverend Herbert Daughtry. I protested in the streets. I got my ass kicked left and right.
For what? What was that for?
One of the Stewart case, and another one was the Baez case. And I don't know if you're familiar with the Baez case, but a young man was playing football in the street. I think it was the night before Thanksgiving, and his football hit a police car. The cop came out and choked him to death. And the cop got away with this. And the judge...
Was this in New York?
Yeah, in New York, yeah.
Oh, wow.
And like in the 80s. It was a long time ago. And Michael Stewart, too, was a graffiti artist in the subway and stuff like that. And there was another case, Eleanor Bumpers. And these are cases where I believe that it demonstrates this police oppression and police targeting young blacks. And I lived through this because I was one of those guys in the street back in those days.
Man.
Sure. Now, but the thing is...
But that's a different issue. But I know we've got, of course, that's a different issue than...
No, not really. It's the same issue because this kid Baez, right? Now, the cop wasn't convicted, and the judge who let this cop off was Judge Scheinlein, who is Judge Judy's husband.
Oh, you're kidding.
I'm not kidding you, man. Now, why is there no outrage? And you're a guy. You wrote for the Village Voice. You're on the right side. You're on the side of the little guy in this case because you see Trayvon Martin as a victim of the oppression of the police, racism, this kind of thing, right?
Well, no. Let me correct you on that. I don't see him as oppression of the police, of the police, because they didn't play a role in this. I see him as a target of an overzealous police wannabe security guard who wanted to be a cop who was too overweight to make it into the police department. I don't blame the police for Trayvon Martin. I want to be clear on that. Right. But I do believe that, people say, well, it's not a case of racism. I believe it is a case. I believe that because I think that, you got to study people, man. You got to look at who they are and try to understand them. I believe that George Zimmerman was probably discriminated against because of the way he looks. People perceive him to be Mexican, Latino. People get, so, you know, when they get the opportunity, Ed, you know, I've seen it, they discriminate, they turn around and discriminate against Asian people, they discriminate against black people. I've seen it.
Oh, no, I'm Cuban. I've lived it.
Yeah,
I know, yeah.
There's a whole subculture of racial discrimination and hatred.
But here's my point, though. Here's the point I'm trying to get across. Is because now here you have this demographic, okay, marching on the streets here against their own interests. The people who are protesting against self-defense rights and against stand your ground and against a jury verdict. These are the people who have the balls to get out in the street and protest against the system and against the government for civil rights and for freedom, right? Back in my day, this is what we did. But nowadays, they're out there marching to have their own rights stripped away from themselves.
In what sense? I'm confused on that.
Because if you're marching, saying, okay, I want to take away my right of self-defense and I want to nullify a jury verdict, okay? Then I'm saying take away my own rights. No?
I don't know. It's a gray area for me. I don't know. I heard you sigh.
Because it's so clear to me, and it's frustrating. Because I see where you're coming from, and on that we're on the same side. You know, that we want the little guy to have justice. We want the little guy to be free of racism and free of oppression in every possible way. But here we have a situation where the people who are being mobilized to take the streets in this issue are asking to have their own rights taken away from them.
Okay, just so I'm clear, we're talking about Trayvon Martin and the stand your ground, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. All right. I know.
Well, look, most self-defense cases, right? They're the Crips against the Bloods. They're fighting over a street corner to sell their crack, and who pulled out the gun first and shot the other guy first in self-defense? Those are 90% of self-defense cases. It's gang stuff. Okay? So now, what now? Take away the right to self-defense? Take away the right to a jury trial?
But we've got to remember, Trayvon Martin was unarmed.
Sure.
George Zimmerman was armed, and my question is, why was he even armed? I live in a gated community in Pennsylvania. My security guards don't drive around with guns. I don't want them to be armed. I don't even understand. I felt like here's another case where the Florida state did not do a good job on that case. You know, I always think to myself, I could have won that case.
You're making the assumption that no one could have won that case, my friend. I guarantee you. You know who could have won it? Joe Francis could have won that case. Otherwise, no one could have.
Joe should have tried that case. He would have won it.
Oh, yeah, he probably would have. But the thing is but you're making the assumption that George Zimmerman was out on community patrol that night, armed patrol. He wasn't patrolling. He was going to get lunch at Target. That's what the testimony came out. And he did call 911. He obeyed the 911 instruction.
At Target. First of all, who gets lunch at Target?
No, some Targets have a supermarket in them.
He was going to get lunch at Target? I never knew that.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I'm not laughing, but it's like he should have kept going.
Well, let me ask you this. No, well, he called the police. He saw something suspicious, okay?
And they don't follow him.
Right, and he didn't.
Follow.
Have you ever listened to the entire 4-minute transcript of that, the entire 4-minute 911 tape? Because he didn't follow. And he was walking around and he was afraid of Trayvon Martin. He says, hey, can you get here quick? I don't know where this guy went. When are the cops coming? Are they coming? I'm afraid. Over and over. Did you ever listen to the police, the detective in charge of this case, was interviewed by the FBI to see if there was any kind of charges of racism, any kind of grounds for racism charge. And he said absolutely none. And that George Zimmerman was upset about a street gang in the neighborhood called the Goons who walked around in hooded sweatshirts all the time. And he says, this has got to be one of these goons that are around here robbing the houses all the time.
So there you go. He targeted him. I don't understand. That shows you right there that he targeted Trayvon Martin. He thought he was one of the goons.
Right, okay, and he called the police.
Well, he also shot and killed him. Let's not forget that part.
Okay, well, right, because there was, we know there was, right, I'm not forgetting, there was an attack, there was a fight, there's injuries on one of them.
Oh.
Many witnesses saw one guy on top of the other guy, and you want to know what, Steph, okay, fine. He had a gun on him, and he used the gun. Maybe if he didn't, his head would have been stomped to death, who knows, okay? I don't carry a gun for that reason, because I'm not ready to take somebody's life when I could just get my ass kicked. And I guess maybe you're the same way. I don't know about you, but...
I've thought about it lately, to be honest with you, but yeah. I have. I would never carry a gun. I've thought about having a gun at my home because I'm in such a rural area, but I struggle with the issue, and I'm sort of on the fence about it. My neighbor has a gun, and Donna. She's a gun-toting Republican. I love her. Nobody gets near my property without Donna getting on the phone. She's home 24/7, so nobody even think about it because Donna's going to get you with her gun, I tell you.
She sounds like George Zimmerman, man. Well, maybe you better do something about this.
No, she calls first, and she calls me first.
Okay, good.
So, no, but here's the problem with the Zimmerman case. There's two people who know the truth,
right,
and one of them's dead. And I just feel like, let's work from there. Of course he's going to change the story. Of course he's going to make it to his advantage. That's human nature. We have to believe George Zimmerman. And there was no clear witnesses that night. There was people who think they heard, sort of heard, kind of saw. It was a dark, rainy evening. So we're never going to know the truth because honestly, Ed, I don't believe George Zimmerman. I don't believe him. I wouldn't believe anybody in that situation because you're like, holy shit, I just killed somebody. Of course you're not going to be like, yeah, I kind of targeted him because he was black and, he didn't, I kind of provoked him and then I shot him. Of course you're not going to say that.
Did you know that when George Zimmerman first called police, he didn't know that Trayvon Martin was black?
I don't believe that for a second.
Well, you don't have to believe me. Just listen to the 911 call.
How can you have a fight if he was on top of you?
No. I'm saying when he first called police, the police said, is he white, black, or Hispanic? He says, I think he's black. Then when Trayvon Martin started to approach Zimmerman's car, he says, oh yeah, he's black. So when he first made the call, he didn't know he was black. And he never mentioned the hood to begin with. They asked, what is he wearing? He said a hooded sweatshirt.
I don't know. What does it all mean at this point,
Yeah, well, I know.
I mean, we can Monday morning quarterback this till we're blue in the face. It's not going to bring Trayvon Martin back. It's not going to change the verdict. What it does, my concern is, and I'm going to be honest with you, is George Zimmerman is out, and I believe him to be a loose cannon. Look at his behavior since he's been on a trial. He's been caught erratically driving with a gun in his car. His wife's called the cops on him and moved out on him because he's been violent. She didn't press charges, which is symptomatic of an abused woman because she's afraid of him. I think it's a ticking time bomb, and the second he reoffends, I want to come back on your radio show and tell you I told you so.
Wait, hold on. You can come back anytime you want, first of all. But the thing is, I'm not saying that George Zimmerman's a great guy or he's not going to reoffend. After what he's been through a trauma. He has post-traumatic stress disorder at this point. I'll defend him. Me and Joe Francis are going to defend George Zimmerman. How's that? Okay. But, listen, and also as far as his wife, obviously she has a press agent now. She's getting on TMZ and Radar Online. You don't get on there by accident. You know how that works.
No, yeah.
So there's a whole agenda going on, and it's become this bigger than life situation. There's this because you know what goes on in real life, and then what gets reported on the press and on these shows and stuff. It's a whole different story. But.
Yeah.
Well, my friend, we got 1 minute left. I'm going to give you the last minute.
Man.
I know. It's been great.
I got nothing to say. When you told me it was 2 hours, I almost fell off my chair. I'm like, what the heck am I going to talk about?
Steph, just say, Ed, you're right, and I'm sorry. Okay?
That is never going to happen.
Okay, well, listen, you know what, man? One good thing came out of this Zimmerman and Trayvon Martin tragedy is we did become friends out of this.
Yeah.
And I got a lot of respect for you, my friend.
I appreciate that.
No, I do, man. Especially when you said, I want to talk about injustice and not about my book or my TV show. So, okay, we got to go. Thank you, Steph Watts.
Thank you so much, Ed. I appreciate it.